does never fail. God never, ever fails. Although there are times that we question God, there are times that we lose our faith in God, there are times that we get discouraged, and there are times that we say, God, have you bumped your head? But I believe that God welcomes all those questions because God will meet our needs all the time, regardless of how we feel about it, right? And I think this is precisely part of what we see in the sacred text for today, that Jesus had no question about what Jesus was called to do and to be, right? And did you see that Jesus refused to get sidetracked? Herod was ready to kill him. And the Pharisees came and said, Jesus, you better get out of Dodge, right? You got to get out of town because Herod is going to kill you. And I love that Jesus responds, you don't tell that fox that I am not afraid of that fox. And I'm not going to be motivated by fear. What I'm going to be motivated by is the things that God has called me to do, because there are people that need to be set free from things that are holding them back. Illness, mental illness, all kinds of discouragement. And so Jesus shows us that God never fails. God's always right on time for each and every situation that we endure and that we go through. This week, as I was thinking about this text and doing what I do, the pastor geek comes out in me, and I love getting all my books out, all of my seminary books. I went back to the original Greek. It was like, oh, there's got to be something in this passage that I'm not noticing. And what I noticed, first of all, was not in the text, but I would say a consequence of the text. I started thinking about courage, right? And I see within this text two different kinds of courage that I define Jesus by, right? The kind of courage that, one, we can all identify with, and that some of us have seen. The courage that when there's something that's going to happen and someone's going to be in danger, this kind of courage where you show up and you do something kind of impulsively, right? Where you push somebody out of the way of a car that they don't see. Right? Or you jump into a river and you rescue somebody who's having difficulty swimming. Or in one of the YouTubes that I watched this week, I was so touched that a dog had fallen into a ravine, right? And they made a human chain of people that made sure that they rescued this dog, right, from danger. This kind of courage, I believe, comes from a characteristic that can be developed within people. The kind of characteristic that we know that we want to show up and make a difference, especially in the event of danger. And then there's a second kind of courage. The courage that we can look at the problems that people are facing, that we can be aware of change that is needed, that can be daunting, that can elicit fear, that calls us to stand up and speak up to make a difference. And even the kind of courage that we risk our status, and all of us have status, don't you know, right? That risk our status and our position in life, but we do so anyway. We do so anyway. Because we know that in doing so, that change can happen, and that freedom can eventually, as we help people work through issues, freedom can be had. And freedom that will liberate others. And that liberation, this kind of courage, sometimes means that we, or the person portraying this kind of courage, might suffer because of it. That's the kind of courage that Jesus displays in this passage. Because even though he knew that Herod was looking for him, we don't know who the Pharisees were that went to tell Jesus or what their motivation was. only that they knew that Jesus was in danger, Jesus said, "Oh no, oh no. I have come to let the captives be free." Jesus comes to proclaim freedom over the brokenness, whatever it might be. And then Jesus says in the text, "And then I will direct myself to Jerusalem, where all prophets die." So by this time in Jesus' ministry, Jesus knows that his ministry will end at the cross in Jerusalem. Jesus also goes on to mourn for Jerusalem. "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you have killed many prophets, and yet you still have not learned of God's desire to set you free." How many times are we Jerusalem? How many times do we find ourselves choosing to not call upon God? How many times do we choose to not be engaged with God or God's people in a way that we could be free? And then Jesus goes on, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem," and then he uses the imagery of absolute love. He uses this image of a mother bird gathering her chicks around her. And then the image is that all of the baby chicks are being protected by their mother. And I hope that they're being protected until they have grown enough to be able to be set free and then to experience the world. But that's the love that Jesus has for all of humanity at all times. There was nothing that we could do ever to cause God to stop loving us. When my daughter Hannah was born, oh my goodness, it was an event. We were adopted parents. We had looked forward to this exchange for more than 6 months. We met with our birth mother each and every Sunday. We really felt like we got to know her. But when we got that call that she was in labor, oh Lord, you know me, I was at the hospital. Right? I didn't want to miss one moment of it. And then Hannah was born. She was put into my arms. And my ex-wife, she was like, "Oh Lord, don't drop her." I was like, "Drop her. I dare you to take this child." And at that moment, the moment of birth and becoming a parent, I realized that I had experienced something that is magical, something that is mysterious, something that I could not fully explain. And I realized that at that moment, I had become vulnerable to this little infant that would count on me and her mother to help her grow to be an amazing human being. And yet there would be a time that I would no longer have a relationship with this human being. But until that reality happened, I realized that as a parent, there's a vulnerability that comes from letting your child grow up and experience life. You cannot save your child from experiencing the lumps and bumps of life. And I came to believe that we should not. But that what we should do as good parents is to be there to help them put life back together again. To help them, it's to help my daughter and my son and my other children learn how to be independent of us, but yet never to be afraid to come and ask for help. Never to be afraid to come and share ideas with us. Never, ever, ever to lose the negotiating essence of what it means to be in a relationship. And yet some of those experiences were the hardest that you could ever imagine. And what I learned was that it takes a lot of courage to be a parent. It takes a lot of courage to help people grow. And that vulnerability that you feel inside yourself is something that will change you forever. And I thought a lot about that this week, in the vulnerability that Jesus experienced in caring for all of us. The vulnerability that Jesus opened himself up to become all that God was calling him to be, only in an effort to teach us and to lead us and to show us what it means to allow ourselves to be vulnerable for each other. Jesus demonstrates for us what it means to have the courage and the strength to be vulnerable for the sake of helping others. And in so doing, Jesus shows us about complete love. Complete love that is based on vulnerability and courage and strength. And I think that's something to take note of, because I'm not so sure that in our culture, in our day, that we see vulnerability as strength or courage. But that we see vulnerability as weakness. That when we are vulnerable, that others will take advantage of us. Or that we allow others to make us vulnerable. When in actuality, being vulnerable allows us to know at our core who we are as people. I found it interesting this week that the Latin word core, C-O-R, is the root of the word courage. And that Latin word core means from the heart. From the heart. So could it be that in this passage from Luke's story, that what Jesus is sharing with us is that when we allow ourselves to live from the heart, then we will know who we are, and that God always meets us in our vulnerabilities. Could it be that as we embrace the heart of who God is in our lives and who God is wanting us to become as people of faith, that we indeed will grow stronger and stronger as we embrace our vulnerabilities and not shy away from them? How many of you were not moved this week by the news of New Zealand? I'm here to tell you, I think the only reason that you could be moved by that experience and pained from that experience is because of the vulnerability in which we know that we live in having a place called MCC Richmond where we can come worship, and that might be taken away from us at the hands of evil. It is not trusting in God, because we all know that disaster and twistedness happens each and every day. But as we are vulnerable and moved by the plight of others, we realize what a wonderful thing it is to have a place to worship. And how can we, as God's people here and now, live wholeheartedly by helping others experience the joy of having a place for which they can worship? You see, that's where vulnerability meets the gospel. That's where vulnerability and courage and strength help us move forward as God's people. And as we ourselves are transformed. And then what happens? By our actions, we transform the world. And I'm here to tell you, it's each and every thing that we do to help people realize that they are valuable and holy and blessed, regardless of the way they worship, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their status in society, regardless of their employment, regardless of their relationship. That as we begin to live in ways that present that truth, the world will be changed. And we ourselves will know fulfillment in a way that we have never imagined. Jesus shows us that as we become more and more secure in who we are, in our relationship with the divine, that we will be ever so sure to stay focused on the things that God has called us to. And I believe as we are focused and we are relentless in giving up, that God will make sure that our motivation is right. And we will continue the path of bringing healing and grace and wholeness to people. And when we are told that we are wrong, we will say, "Get behind me, you old fox." Get behind me, you old fox, because I am confident in who God is in my life. And that confidence comes from the courage that we muster up to live in vulnerability. I believe it to be so. We, at our house, had the most amazing experience. Miss Jezebel, those of you who haven't met Jezebel yet, she's a little cat. And we believed that Jezebel was a feral cat. And Jezebel decided that she was going to take residence on our front porch. And you know, I went crazy. I was like, "Kirk, we have to feed this adorable cat. We have to." It wasn't hard to convince Kirk to be able to do it. So we got Jezebel a kennel, and we put a towel in there, and she was just lovely. She was just lovely. And then all of a sudden, the threat of winter came. And almost at the same time, Jezebel first appeared on our porch. She came with a little kitten. And we were like, "Oh Lord, how many Jezebels are there?" How many? And it was interesting to watch the way Jezebel took care of this little kitten. Because it was true. Jezebel took that cat, and at first we didn't see her because Jezebel made sure she covered her entire being. Every part of this kitten was covered, right? And then we realized, we've got to make sure that Jezebel has a home that she could care for herself and others. And it was in watching Jezebel care for that cat that was amazing. Jezebel instinctively knew what to do. Jezebel, as it turns out, is not a feral cat. She has just been put out. Right? Because she has become one of the most loving cats ever. Right? And we are lovingly taking care of her. We made sure that in winter she was warm. We had electricity. I don't know, it's a little twisted. We had an outlet put for the porch so that her house could be heated. Because Jezebel has claws, and our cats inside do not have claws, so that wouldn't work. But it was in knowing that Jezebel knew how to take care of this kitten that amazed me. As it turns out, that kitten was not Jezebel's. But Jezebel, you see, she doesn't have the experience of knowing what brutality is. She doesn't have the experience of knowing what marginalization is. She doesn't have the experience of knowing how difficult it could be to be unhappy at your job. She just knows what it's like to be a loving, adorable cat, and to know how to instinctively take care of other cats who cannot take care of themselves. And I think that's the kind of vulnerability that we live. We just don't know it. That God uses our conversations, that God uses every effort that we have to create a world where people are treated fairly. Can you imagine a world that has a continual sense of loving others, especially those who are different from us? Can you imagine a world in which we take care of one another? Can you imagine a world in which people from foreign lands are welcome to come and to live, to experience safety, to experience wholeness? Can you imagine a world where people are affirmed instead of torn down? Can you imagine a world where justice is a common trait? I believe that John Lennon's words to his song Imagine call us to imagine a world in which we can risk being vulnerable because of the great God that gives us purpose, because of the God who meets us and allows us to be vulnerable, to share our vulnerabilities with each other, and that we share them in a cross-shaped form, knowing that as we share with one another, that we remind each other of God's love for us at all times. This is what it means to be vulnerable, to be a person who lives with courage, to be a person who's strengthened by their faith. And faith too. But I believe that God is calling us to be people who stand up for one another, people who listen to one another, and people who help each other no matter what. To embrace the God that we know most fully from manger to cross, knowing that Jesus will meet our need as we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with one another and vulnerable with the whole. And so let us continue to create this reality here at MCC Richmond in all that we do. And I believe that God will transform us, which will allow us to transform this congregation, our families, the greater Richmond area, and the world. And look out, because MCC Richmond is on a roll. Amen?
Amen.